Welcome to another episode of Aiding Your Game, a web series where we discuss role-playing games and how to augment and enhance gameplay for the players as well as the GM alike. Designed specifically for GMs, we hope this brings a lot of enjoyable content to you. Today we're going to be following up our previous videos on how to start a single story and lead that into longer-term campaigns. So let's jump in and get going. So in previous videos we talked about designing an adventure, a way to get the players to cooperatively work together to take on some type of challenge that you as the GM have set, and how to design and create those adventures one shot at a time so that you're not overwhelmed with work, and it will allow that growth and development to see who is interested in continuing on that story and who may bow out. Overall, we really feel that this is a great approach for new players, new GMs, and new groups who are forming. If you as a GM are thinking about that 20-year campaign and you are just gathering up players, you're just now ending a campaign, getting ready to start another, whatever the dynamics may be, we hope that these tips and tricks help guide you onto more enjoyable playtime, less work, and a great engagement for your players to participate in the table, thereby making the storytelling and story more enjoyable for everyone involved. In the previous sessions, we had talked quite a bit about a set location. We had picked a villain. We kind of talked about a story theme, an overarching feel of the story in a high epic fantasy, and how to get those players motivated along the way, as well as reviewed some of the challenges that the players' decisions and choices in that environment could have for a GM. So diving into a little bit of follow-up on that, in review, we talked about having a ogre be a primary villain who was attacking a village, and the PCs were there to foil those plans, overcome the ogre, and ultimately save the day. Now, we did talk a lot about a hook at the end to continue that story moving forward. Hopefully, all of your players enjoyed the gameplay, the game style, and the theme of the campaign, and are ready to go on to that next leg of their adventure. By this point, your players should be working out some of their dynamics. How are they playing their character? What are their go-to spells or weapons or skills? How are they going to engage with the environment? Are they friendly towards the villagers? Do they go above and beyond to assist and help? Do they treat them nonchalantly as a means to an end? As a GM, these types of interactions are really important for you to pay attention to, especially because you can then begin to tailor stories around your PCs, which ultimately is the whole reason of enjoying role-playing games. By taking some notes yourself on what do your players enjoy in that game session and reviewing those after the fact, it can really help guide you on how you want to unfold and tell this story with them. It may be that some players just did not work with you and you are not going to be playing with them again. That's fine. Definitely jot down a couple notes of why, because these are characteristics and traits that you can watch for and let others who are interested in joining your game know that you won't tolerate or will not want at your game. It'll help allow you to better suit the table environment to someone or feeling that everybody can get along with and that you can manage really well. So very important to also look at that. Additionally, look for things that you do that the players find extremely challenging, or items that they may not be very interested in. What can you do to tweak and adapt those? Maybe they were hoping for greater treasure. Maybe they were hoping for more challenge. Ultimately, look and see, what did your players really enjoy and not enjoy? And you can tell a lot of that just through their body language. But additionally, at the end of the session, I hope you took the time to stop and just chat. Ask questions. Ask them flat out, what did they enjoy and what they didn't? What are they hoping to see for their characters? What are they hoping to see for their story arcs? What are they hoping to gain from the experience? Utilizing these bits of information can help design the way your campaign will be built based off these single issue stories. Now, again, at this point, I don't think it's very wise to dive into the thought process of that 20-year campaign. But if you had a good time, your players had a good time, and everything seemed to flow really well, now you can start planning on maybe 3 to 5 sessions in advance. With that ogre attacking the village, we can start thinking bigger and broader. Why was he there? What's the push that made him start attacking those? Maybe it was something where you want to turn that ogre who was the villain into that almost sympathetic villain. He did it because a greater power took all his food stores or pushed him out of his homeland and separated him from his family. Things like that can really come back onto the players, in that while they saved the day and now the town is safe, there could be a more dynamic game play here where they have to answer for ultimately destroying or thwarting an ogre who was merely trying to get by day, who was separated from his family. So with these story elements, now you can start thinking a little bit bigger and broader. Start looking at your maps and saying what kind of interesting things are in that couple of day out from town to a week out of town. What are those features, and how can we utilize those in-game? By using the previous examples, we'll expand on what we had roughly created and just take the next step onto maybe the next 3 games planning sessions in this video. So let's start with a quick review that everybody enjoyed the game and they were happy with the overall pacing, the storytelling was good, and they seemed to enjoy it. They're hoping to have a bigger impact on the local lore of the realm, and maybe one of the player characters wants to become some type of a political figure in this realm because he saw an opportunity by his interactions with NPCs. So knowing some of this detail, knowing that our villain was thwarted and was an ogre who was attacking the land, we can start looking at why were there no other guards here. Possibly this is on a very frontier edge and the crown hasn't paid it much mind, with a group of heroes who are saving the day and protecting the realm. It's very possible that your PC who is interested in gaining some type of a lord or ladyship could be granted a boon by the crown, which could be one of the hooks into the next set of stories. Going back into the ogre's kind of background, how to expand on that. Maybe one of the things they found in the ogre's lair we mentioned was a map, and this map could show the ogre's initial village and a mention of a recently found ancient doorway that led down, and once they discovered that doorway and opened it up, the village was sacked and the ogres had to move on. That should be pretty good indicator that that's a great place to visit next and see what made these ogres have to disband and turn to looting and pillaging for their way of life. Ultimately, with this being a high fantasy, we can then just start having fun with it. Ultimately, whatever the choice is, it should be challenging and engaging for your players, as well as fun for you. Never forget that part of being a GM is definitely having some fun yourself. So, expanding on our previous information that we had with our story, we want to build maybe the next 3 sessions. We want to have the players go and explore the ogre's former home and dive into the evil that displaced them. Just going through and picking something out of the monster manual can be fun, can be challenging, and it can be pretty insightful in some of the things that you can find. So let's go through and plan a 3-session run based on our previous story. So because we are focusing heavily on Dungeons and Dragons, we will be using some of their core materials. And in this one here, choosing that next 3 story arc, we're going to lean on to the monster manual. So one of the fun things I like to do is just go through and look at something that's a little different, something that can be fun to kind of twist and use in my own way. And I really recommend that you do the same thing once or twice. Don't change it all the time, but that really helps kind of catch the players off guard. That, of course, helps with less metagaming and ultimately can be a lot of fun to have them and their reactions help build the story. So going through this, we talked a little bit about our players being lower level characters, so we don't want to go with anything too high of DC or CR rating the way the books have it, but just kind of looking through the monster manual and picking something that could have offset the ogres. We need to look at the ogres a little bit. Ultimately, we just picked them for that first session because it was a great challenge rating for our player characters. We knew it would be something that they would have to be a little bit more cunning and out of the box thinking to be able to overcome. But looking at the ogres themselves, they have some really interesting information. So based on the description and information in the book, we know that they are definitely fierce, they're greedy, they are not very intelligent, they wander, and some of their information talks about how they are not afraid to kill just for the layers themselves. So in their hometown or home location, we need to think of that and what could have driven them away, because they are supposed to be very fierce and territorial. So just looking at the description of the ogre doesn't really give a whole lot of insight into what would have driven them out. Instead, I just flipped through and found a couple of options. So the first one was mummies. They're not used a whole ton in a lot of the campaigns I ran, so it makes sense to use something that you don't use a lot or your players are not super familiar with. We talked a little bit about them opening an ancient doorway. It could be some type of an ancient temple or something like that that freed mummies. And the mummies, of course, could be the next kind of step in exploring this ancient tomb. Also, when the players go into the ancient ogre steading or cavernous realm, it could be something to lead on to bigger and better things. Ultimately going into a mummy lord, which according to the monster manual is a very high CR, so it may take some time to get there. So I don't know if we're ready for that just yet, but it's a good thought. The second one I kind of eyeballed was nagas. They are, again, something that can inhabit ruins of the past, and if they were freed, could run amok over some ogres pretty easily, and are a step up from an ogre as far as your challenge rating goes. Starting with the Bone Naga, it could be something where as the players go and begin exploring the ancient caves and looking for this doorway that was opened, could be a Bone Naga who was going through and causing those ogres to have to flee. The third one was salamanders, and again, something I don't use a whole lot, but very interesting monsters in their own right. This one kind of caught my guard because I haven't used them for a long time, and the thought of their fire snakes and the salamanders finally being set free accidentally by the ogre was pretty interesting, and in my opinion could lead to a lot of great opportunity for the role players in and of itself. Over the next 3, possibly to 5, they could have to go and check out the place that drove the ogre away, the place that the ogre was from. That could be done via the hook that we left in with the map, some type of ruins, something that hooked them to go and explore this next leg of their adventure. The salamanders could be a great one because as they're going there, you can use some of that environmental information, the burning, the smoke, the sulfuric smells, the chaos that these ogres had with a big change and why they had to flee their previous homestead. So it kind of leads itself really well into that, and that's what I would go with. Something that was fun, different, and easy to build upon. So after they explore, they may have to destroy a fire serpent or two, find the ancient temple. That could be the next session. And again, some of this will vary based on how long your sessions are. But then finding that ancient temple or doorway, it could lead them into a place where salamanders are actually having been transported to or captured and held. Having to defeat the salamanders in this environment could be a second or even third adventure as they're exploring these ancient cryptic ruins, these ancient underground temples, this abandoned city possibly. It starts to bring to mind more and more story elements and builds upon that first piece. Again, we don't want to get too overwhelmed with it. Just think out 3 to 5 max next bits or legs of this story. So I think for this one here, for this example, we'll use the salamander as the next kind of big bad guy over our initial big bad guy who was just an ogre. So putting that down, the ogre who we used as the first game story, the first big bad guy, the first element that brought this group of adventurers together, kind of launches them onto this bigger campaign, this multi-tiered adventure. Now they have to go and discover what displaced the ogres and contend with that. So getting to there and exploring the initial ramifications of the event that spurred the parting of the ogres could be session number 2. Thinking about that in our 3-story plot, we want to have some type of dynamic where the characters get to explore, they get to discover some type of information and have encounter with that, and then ultimately what the outcome is. So we'll plan a couple of items along the way just in case we want to have a random encounter along the road. If not, if you want to skip that, that's fine as well. But there is a lot of good opportunity to start driving some of those role play aspects in some placed environment where they have no choice but to interact with each other and some of the elements from the environment. Let's talk a little bit about that. Random encounters, I actually really enjoy because a lot of people view them as just a combat encounter along the road. I actually view them as more than that. If the player characters are having to sleep overnight, for instance, one of my encounters is definitely some type of driven narrative on the part of an NPC. If I have an NPC with the characters, it's great. If not, it's someone they meet along the way. It doesn't always have to mean combat. It could be something as easy as changing information, giving a story, giving some insight into the NPC that may drive some type of role-playing from one of the characters. If they change who they're sitting on watch with to an NPC, it's a great opportunity for that. So think about things like that. In this example, one of the items I would put on a random table for an encounter would be something like a merchant caravan coming down from the mountains. Additionally, we would pick some combat encounters, whether that be bandits, dire wolves along the road. There are plenty of different opportunities. Think of a couple. You don't have to go into super deep detail on them. Just get a couple ideas, jot them down on some paper, number them 1, 2, whatever, and then have the players roll a dice. See if they happen to encounter one of your random encounters. It can be a lot of fun, especially if you have the time. If you have multi-hour sessions, it's a great way to just fill out some of that time sharing. So back onto the main story. Having gotten to the area where the ogres had been living, now our characters begin to explore. Again, building on the first example that we used of the storytelling premise, now we want to show that this adventure these characters have started to partake on is bigger. We talk more about sweeping vistas, larger forests, mountain ranges that stretch for days. Start building upon your descriptors and let them see that there is much, much more than one small village being attacked by an ogre. When you're describing, in this case we're using the salamanders, starting with the fire snake, the kind of hints or elements that this fire snake or fire snakes are doing. Talk about the plumes of smoke, the smells, the sights, the sounds of still cindering ashes and coals along the roadway in what once was a beautiful forest but is now just charred remains of stumps poking up from ash-covered soil. Make sure to use lots of descriptors. This should lead them to believe that there's definitely something that involves fire, something on a larger scale, and something that they may not be fully prepared for. As you begin to give them the area details, they should, of course, naturally want to explore and conquer all. Give them the opportunity to do this, because as they are successful in their endeavors, they build more and more camaraderie around the table, which is very important for the players. If you have those who are more interested in combat, those who are more interested in skills, let them each shine. As one of them is checking for signs of an enemy, they're the ones who discover that something has been lurking in these parts, and it appears that they're changing paths and are now behind the PCs, which then allows your battle-hardened PCs able to get some kicks in, but without being surprised, because your characters who are using their skill checks were able to determine where this attack was coming from, or that they were being ambushed or something. Make sure to add in elements that all of your characters can enjoy. Now, upon going through and doing some exploration on the caverns, here is where you can really take creative license. Maybe your ogres were not just ferocious beasts, but living in a family community that was really supported by the land, and they weren't bothering anybody until they came across this ancient door that they accidentally opened or mindlessly opened in their own explorations. some of these kind of things can be great for role-playing, because at that point, do the characters revel in the fact that they destroyed this ogre session so brilliantly, or do they start wondering if they made the right call? Ultimately, it's up to you and how you want to play your game, but adding some moral dilemma could be a lot of fun. Then too, it can be a challenging one to manage how people will adapt to those moral dilemmas. Maybe you want to keep moral dilemmas out of it because you're only here to smash and grab, and that's fine too. There's no wrong way to play, just a good idea to keep your options open. Going back in, they should have good encounters with the fire serpents and be able to find some good treasures that the ogres had left that the fire serpents are not interested in at all, and there again have some type of a confrontation where they are faced with that fire snake and they have to overcome and ultimately destroy. Maybe it's a group of a few fire snakes. Of course, make sure that you're setting your challenges to the right level to keep them balanced, fun, but not just one-sided, and play your fire snakes the way the monster manual and the materials describe it, changing just here and there for more elements of your storytelling. Ultimately, this should end the session on a good note of them finally finding the door. There's nothing like a great leave-off point where they're itching to know what's the next step. With this one here, you could start talking about how there are burnt handprints on the door. The fire snakes, of course, don't have any hands, so this should be that next indicator of there's something even bigger and badder beyond these fire snakes that beat the ogres, that beat the villagers. It should continue on a chain like this. Ultimately, the idea is to continue that story progression by thinking ahead but not thinking too far ahead. It would be extremely easy to go through and say that this is definitely the work of Mephistopheles, who is unleashing Bizzle creatures on the realm, and it's up to the PCs to gain the power of gods to destroy them. You're thinking too far ahead. Keep it in bite-sized pieces, because those are the pieces that your players will enjoy. Your players will be able to keep their minds wrapped around and will have fun coming back to, without feeling like they have any type of a loss of control if any type of a life event comes up. If they have to move, if they're having children, anything like that. It should be okay for a player to be able to step away and not derail a campaign. The story will continue to go on. It should not change the dynamic more so than it needs to. Things like that are extremely challenging and hard to overcome. As a good GM, the easiest thing you can think of is think of it in terms of manageable, bite-sized pieces that your players can enjoy. If, for instance, this type of a piece were happening and a player had to leave the game for a life event, it's easier to bow out knowing that, well, we'd just gotten to a temple, there's something big behind there, but I think the players have got this. In my next group, maybe I'll have something that's very similar that we can explore. And while it's still challenging, it's a heck of a lot easier to walk away and be able to continue playing in a campaign where you feel like it's not going to derail the campaign. So again, bite-sized pieces are great. Keep it manageable for yourself alone. Just the little bits we talked about here. I said it's 2, maybe 3 sessions out. Quite a bit to work with, quite a bit you have to flesh out details on, quite a bit you have to prepare for. But again, it's keeping it manageable to where you're not overwhelmed. Items like this we just came up with on the fly. We can flesh out more details and ultimately make it a stronger and deeper campaign setting for a longer haul rather than just a one-shot story. But even as a standalone one-shot story, this type of environment works really well. So I hope you enjoyed this one, as we worked a little bit from taking our single story into a multi-story bit, as we're leading on to how to build a campaign. Next week's video, we're going to be putting this all into play, starting with a single story element, building it into a 3-story arc, and to be a little more challenging for ourselves, we're going to do it in 2 genres. We're going to cover D&D, but we're also going to cover Star Wars, because why not give ourselves a little bit of a challenge? And with a lot of the attention that Star Wars has been getting recently, we definitely want to pay some respects there. So regardless of your game, regardless of your table dynamics, we hope that you enjoyed this video. We hope it brings you a lot of enjoyment and opportunity to enjoy your game and engage your players even more. Prior to us leaving, we will review one product, as we have started doing in this last one. Of course, down in the comments below, we still have our Kickstarter going. Very important that we try to hit our very modest goal. It's not very much that we are looking at attaining to help us move into our studio and get better equipment, be able to launch our 2nd season, which will start in 4 more sessions. But definitely, if you know someone who is a backer, or if you have a few bucks that you want to donate to a great cause, get some great swag while you're at it, the link is below. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, check us out on Facebook, also the link down below, and see our new webpage, which the link is also below. Thank you for your time. We hope this has brought enjoyment to you. And of course, always ask, where will your adventures take you?